Hello everyone, and welcome back to Podcast Center. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches every single one of us at some point: managing conflicts. Whether it's a heated disagreement with a colleague, a misunderstanding with a loved one, or even an internal struggle with ourselves, conflict is part of life.
That's right, Katharina. And let's face it, conflicts can be messy, frustrating, and emotionally draining. But here's the good news: there are also opportunities. Opportunities to grow, to learn, and to strengthen relationships if handled wisely.
Exactly, Marco. Managing conflict isn't just about finding solutions, it's about building bridges, fostering understanding, and sometimes even transforming tension into connection. And for our English learners out there, today's episode will also include helpful phrases, vocabulary, and tips to help you navigate conflicts in English.
Like the phrase "find common ground," which is all about identifying shared interests or goals to resolve a disagreement. Or "agree to disagree," a polite way of saying we respect each other's opinions, even if they're different. We'll break down these kinds of expressions as we explore how to manage conflicts in work, relationships, and everyday life.
And we'll share real-life examples and strategies that you can apply immediately. From active listening to assertive communication, we're here to help you turn conflicts into stepping stones, not stumbling blocks.
So, whether you're dealing with a tricky situation at work, a family disagreement, or even a clash of cultures, we've got you covered. Stick with us as we unpack the art, and yes, it's an art of managing conflicts effectively.
Ready to dive in? Let's turn conflict into connection and equip you with the tools to handle any challenge that comes your way.
Let's get started.
All right, Marco, let's start with a question. When you hear the word conflict, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Honestly, stress. A situation where emotions run high and communication breaks down. But then again, it also makes me think about the opportunity to fix things and create something better.
Exactly. Conflict is like a double-edged sword. It can break things apart or build stronger connections depending on how you handle it. What about at work? How do you think workplace conflicts usually arise?
Oh, that's an easy one: different personalities, clashing priorities, or even miscommunication. For example, someone might interpret direct feedback as criticism, while another sees it as constructive advice.
Right. And here's a quick English phrase for our listeners: clear the air. It means addressing misunderstandings to resolve tension. For example, we had a meeting to clear the air after the disagreement.
Great phrase! And it's such a crucial step. A lot of conflicts come from people assuming things instead of clarifying. What do you think works best for resolving personal conflicts, like in relationships or families?
Active listening, for sure. It's amazing how much can change when you really hear someone out without interrupting. Sometimes people just want to feel understood, you know?
Absolutely. And speaking of listening, here's a vocabulary tip for our learners. To validate someone's feelings, it means showing someone that their emotions are acknowledged and respected, like saying, "I understand why you're upset."
Such an important skill. And it's not just about agreeing with someone, it's about making them feel heard. What about cultural conflicts? Those can be tricky because they often involve deeply rooted values.
Great point. Cultural conflicts often stem from different perspectives on what's considered polite, normal, or respectful. For example, in some cultures, being direct is valued, while in others, it might be seen as rude.
True. And to bridge those gaps, it's all about empathy and curiosity. Instead of judging, ask questions and try to understand why people do what they do. For our English learners, a great phrase here is "walk a mile in someone else's shoes." It means trying to see things from their perspective.
I love that phrase. It's such a simple yet powerful mindset shift. And in practical terms, resolving these kinds of conflicts often involves compromise. Like meeting halfway, both sides adjusting a little.
Compromise is key. And for a quick tip, use the phrase "strike a balance" when you talk about finding harmony between two opposing views. Like, we need to strike a balance between tradition and modernity.
That's a great one, Katharina. What about internal conflicts when someone is struggling with their own decisions or emotions? Those can be the hardest to resolve.
So true, Marco. Internal conflicts often require self-awareness. You need to identify the root cause of your feelings, weigh your options, and, most importantly, be kind to yourself during the process.
And for that, a useful English phrase is make peace with yourself. It means accepting your decisions or situation to move forward. For example, he made peace with himself after changing his career path.
That's a beautiful phrase. And honestly, making peace with yourself is one of the biggest victories in conflict resolution, don't you think?
Absolutely. It all starts within. If you can manage your internal conflicts, you're much better equipped to handle external ones.
So, Marco, let's talk about those heated arguments where emotions take over. How do you keep things from spiraling out of control in the moment?
I think the first step is to pause. Take a deep breath and resist the urge to react impulsively. That small pause can stop you from saying something you might regret later.
That's such a simple but effective tip. And for our English learners, here's a handy expression. Bite your tongue. It means holding back from saying something, especially when emotions are high. Like, I wanted to argue, but I bit my tongue instead.
Oh, that's a good one. It's so relatable. And I think another key is choosing your words carefully. Using neutral language instead of accusatory phrases can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Instead of saying, you always do this, you could say, I feel frustrated when this happens. It shifts the focus from blaming the other person to expressing your feelings.
Exactly. And that approach is especially useful in professional settings. Workplace conflicts can escalate quickly if the tone isn't respectful. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
Oh, plenty of times. I remember a disagreement with a colleague over a project deadline. Instead of accusing them of being late, I asked, how can we adjust the timeline to make this work? That one question changed the entire tone of the conversation.
That's a great strategy, problem solving instead of finger pointing. And for our listeners, here's a phrase to use in such situations. Let's find a way forward. It's a collaborative way to steer the conversation toward a solution.
Such a positive phrase. And speaking of positive, sometimes humor can diffuse a tense situation, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. A lighthearted comment can break the tension as long as it's appropriate and doesn't minimize the issue. It shows you're willing to approach things with an open mind.
Right. Humor works well in personal conflicts too. Like when you're arguing with a sibling and one of you cracks a joke to lighten the mood. It's an instant tension breaker.
It really is. But humor aside, I think it's also important to know when to step away. Sometimes taking a break and revisiting the issue later gives everyone a chance to cool off and think more clearly.
Agreed. And here's a useful English phrase for our learners. Take a breather. It means stepping away for a short time to regain composure. For example, let's take a breather and discuss this again tomorrow.
That's perfect. And while taking a breather, it helps to reflect on your role in the conflict. Self-awareness is so underrated in these situations, don't you think?
Totally. It's easy to point fingers, but reflecting on what you could have done differently can be a game changer. It's about accountability.
Yes, and accountability leads to growth. It's not just about resolving conflicts, it's about learning from them to handle future ones better.
Exactly. And when both parties take that approach, conflicts don't just end, they transform into something constructive.
That's the sweet spot, isn't it? Turning conflict into collaboration.
Marco, I've noticed that some people avoid conflicts altogether. They just walk away or suppress their feelings. Do you think that's an effective strategy?
Not really. Avoiding conflicts might feel like the easiest way out, but it usually just delays the problem. Those unresolved feelings can build up over time and resurface in unexpected ways.
Exactly. It's like sweeping dust under the rug. It's still there, and eventually, you'll have to deal with it. But I do think there's a difference between avoiding conflict and choosing your battles.
That's a good distinction. Sometimes it's better to let minor things go if they're not worth the energy. But when something truly matters, addressing it calmly is the better choice.
For sure. And for our listeners, here's a great English phrase. Pick your battles. It means deciding which conflicts are worth engaging in and which ones to let go of. For example, I didn't argue about the seating arrangement. I decided to pick my battles.
That's such a helpful phrase, Katharina. And it reminds me of how important timing is in resolving conflicts. Bringing up an issue when emotions are high can backfire. Waiting until everyone is calmer can lead to a much more productive conversation.
True. Timing is everything. And when you finally address the issue, using open-ended questions can be a great way to start. Instead of saying, "Why did you do that?" try asking, "Can you help me understand what happened?" It creates space for dialogue.
That's a fantastic tip. It also makes the other person feel less defensive. And for English learners, using phrases like "help me understand" or "what are your thoughts on this" can make any conversation feel more collaborative.
Absolutely. And collaboration is key, especially in group settings. Have you ever noticed how conflicts in teams often arise from unclear communication or overlapping responsibilities?
Oh, all the time. A team can have the best intentions, but if roles aren't clearly defined, it's a recipe for misunderstandings. That's why setting expectations from the start is so important.
Agreed. And when things do go wrong, acknowledging the issue as a group instead of pointing fingers can be a game changer. Saying something like, "Let's figure out what went wrong as a team," encourages unity.
Yes, it shifts the focus from blame to solutions. And here's another phrase for our learners: let's get on the same page. It means ensuring everyone understands and agrees on a plan. For instance, before we start the project, let's get on the same page about deadlines.
Oh, I love that phrase. It's simple, but it can prevent so many conflicts before they even begin. Speaking of prevention, how do you think self-care fits into managing conflicts?
It's huge. If you're stressed, sleep-deprived, or burned out, you're more likely to react emotionally instead of rationally. Taking care of yourself gives you the mental clarity and patience to handle conflicts better.
Absolutely. Self-care isn't just about bubble baths or relaxation, it's about setting boundaries, saying no when you need to, and prioritizing your well-being. It's like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Such a powerful reminder. And when you practice self-care, it's easier to approach conflicts with a calm and open mindset, which benefits everyone involved.
Definitely, and that calm mindset can be contagious. When one person stays composed, it often diffuses tension for everyone else.
It really does. A calm tone, a thoughtful pause, or even just steady eye contact can set the tone for the entire conversation. Small gestures can have such a big impact.
You know, Marco, one thing I've been wondering about is how culture influences the way people handle conflicts. Have you noticed differences in how conflicts are approached in different cultural settings?
Absolutely. In some cultures, direct communication is seen as honest and efficient, while in others, it's considered confrontational or even disrespectful. People from more indirect cultures might avoid open conflict and use subtle hints to address issues.
That's such an interesting contrast. Like, in some Asian cultures, harmony is highly valued, so conflicts might be resolved quietly to maintain peace. On the other hand, in Western cultures, people often view conflicts as opportunities for growth and problem solving.
Exactly. And that's why being culturally aware is so important, especially in diverse workplaces or international settings. You can't apply a one-size-fits-all approach to resolving conflicts.
Totally. And for our listeners, here's a useful English expression related to this. Read the room. It means observing the mood or dynamics of a situation before speaking or acting. For instance, I decided to stay quiet during the meeting because I could read the room and sense tension.
That's such a valuable skill, reading the room. It helps you adapt your communication style to fit the situation. But at the same time, there's also value in staying authentic while being mindful of the context.
True. Authenticity is key. If you're too calculated, it can come off as insincere. I think it's about finding that balance, being respectful and mindful while staying true to yourself.
Well said. And speaking of balance, I think it's also important to balance emotions and logic when managing conflicts. Too much emotion can cloud your judgment, but being overly logical can make you seem detached or cold.
Right. And that balance can look different depending on the situation. For example, in personal relationships, showing empathy is crucial, but in a business setting, leaning on facts and data might carry more weight.
Absolutely. It's about knowing your audience and adjusting accordingly. And for our English learners, here's another phrase to add to your vocabulary: strike a balance. It means finding the middle ground between two extremes. For example, in managing conflicts, it's important to strike a balance between listening and expressing your own point of view.
Such a versatile phrase. And it's a reminder that managing conflicts is a skill that takes practice. No one gets it perfect every time, but the effort to improve makes a huge difference.
Couldn't agree more. Each conflict you navigate teaches you something new, whether it's about yourself, the other person, or the situation. It's like building a muscle. You get stronger the more you work on it.
So true, Marco. And honestly, managing conflicts is not just about solving problems. It's also about building better relationships. When handled well, conflicts can deepen trust and understanding.
That's a great point, Katharina. It's all about seeing conflicts as opportunities rather than threats. Shifting that mindset can completely change how you approach them.
All right, listeners, let's sum up what we've discussed today about managing conflicts in different aspects of life. We've explored how to stay calm, use thoughtful language, and balance emotions with logic. We've also highlighted the importance of cultural awareness, self-care, and choosing your battles wisely.
Exactly. And remember, conflicts aren't necessarily bad. They're opportunities to grow, learn, and strengthen relationships. Whether it's in personal life, at work, or even within yourself, the key is to approach conflicts with patience, empathy, and an open mind.
And don't forget the practical tips we shared. Use phrases like "help me understand," "let's get on the same page," and strike a balance to navigate conversations smoothly. Also, read the room and adapt to the situation. These are not just great tools for managing conflicts, but also for improving your English skills.
Well said, Katharina. Our advice to you is this: practice these strategies in your daily life. Whether it's a small disagreement with a friend or a big challenge at work, every conflict you handle is a chance to become better. And for our English learners, every conversation is also an opportunity to expand your vocabulary and confidence.
Absolutely. So, keep practicing, stay curious, and don't shy away from conflicts. They're just part of life. We hope today's discussion not only helps you with conflict management, but also adds some valuable phrases and expressions to your English learning journey.
If you enjoyed this podcast and found it helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring you even more engaging topics.
And don't stop there. Share this podcast with your friends and family so they can join in on the learning too. Together, let's build a community of curious, confident learners.
Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Stay positive, keep learning, and remember, practice makes progress. Until next time, happy learning. Happy learning, everyone. See you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.